Before using the rope, make sure that students have their hands through the wrist straps of their poles. When they walk over to the rope, they'll try to get close to the rope, and both skis pointing uphill, then the poles can hang by the wrist straps, and they'll put their hands around the rope and very slowly squeeze to take off. Once they get up a short ways, they'll let go of the rope and step the skis across the hill, and then they can use their poles to get set up in their good athletic stance. The first time down the hill, they'll just focus on skiing in their athletic position and making a wedge that they already know how to do. Now we're ready to start talking about turns. We'll practice statically. And if they have their poles, they can lift up one of their skis and just try pointing their toe across the hill and back. They'll get a feel for turning their foot by doing this a couple of times. They'll do it with each ski. If they don't happen to have their poles, they can just stand on one ski and with the foot on the ground try turning and pointing their toes. Now we're ready to try to do it in motion, and we'll have them start in their good athletic stance. Get some speed going, so we'll have them count 1, 2, 3 of speed before we even think about making a turn. With our athletic stance, 1, 2, 3, now we have some speed. Very slightly point both toes across the hill, then we let everything run downhill. 1, 2, 3, point both toes across in the other direction, and then let everything run downhill. So the issues that we will have is trying to turn too quickly. So many of them will take off, and instead of counting 1, 2, 3, they'll want to turn right away, so they won't let this speed build up. Or when they do start to turn, they'll want to turn their feet. Instead of just a little bit, they'll keep turning until they're pointing across the hill with the skis, which will make the next turn very hard. Or they'll go from one turn and immediately want to turn their skis in the other direction rather than letting everything flow downhill. Any of these three issues will usually end up having them start to turn their shoulders and their hips rather than just using their feet to turn their skis. Usually, too, you'll notice that that first time down when they start focusing in on the turn, just changing their focus to turning, many of them will lose their stance, and you'll have to start making them aware that they've got to stay in that stance even though they're now thinking about turning their feet. So again, it's really key to keep everything straight running, build that speed, count out 1, 2, 3, slight turn, 1, 2, 3, slight turn, and that will set them up to build the momentum and then keep the momentum moving them into the new turn after that very slight first turn. It's also important that we don't try to turn on a hill that's very flat and very slow, because there's so little friction there's so much friction when we're going that slow that it's hard to turn the feet, and they'll end up using their shoulders and their hips. If we're just trying to use the shape of the ski, we're going so slow that the forces are very low and we never really feel any kind of connection or response from the ski. So we want to pick a hill that's steeper, and we want to be going with more speed rather than trying to do it on a flat hill that's very slow and turning just to a stop. We want to just have a very minimum turn so that we build momentum and keep the momentum rolling down the hill. The other way that we can have them work on it is to just, instead of pointing the toes, we'll have them just try to push on one toe and the other. As they're doing this, it feels like they're kneeling down, and it's really their ankle that's bending. So when we're statically practicing with them, they'll feel like they're pushing on their toe, and it's really the ankle that's bending. The thing you'll have to watch out for is many of them will just try to take the knee inside rather than bending forward. They'll bend to the side with it, or they'll actually try to take their hip, and they'll move their hip to the outside, which will flatten out the ski. They can try this with both of their skis, and then they're ready to put it into action. When they start off again, it's the very same critical starting elements that must be there, the athletic stance, and let the speed build up. But this time, instead of pointing the toes, they're just going to push on their right toe, make a little turn in this instant, and then let everything move back downhill. Let some speed build up again and push on the left toe. So just like the last time, it's straight, slight turn, but this time they're pushing on one toe then the other. After they have a feel for that, we're ready to start linking things up. They can head down the hill again. Athletic stance is always the key, building that speed. And whether they point their toes or they push on one toe and the other toe, we're just trying to get them successfully making some turns. Sometimes neither approach will work there, and so they might have to combine them. So as they push on their toe, they can think about turning it, and that will generate success. Or sometimes that doesn't work, but just changing the order. So now instead of pushing and turning, they can think turn both toes and then push on the toe. So you're just trying to find what will connect and what will successfully get them start to make some turns. By just changing their tempo, a lot of times we can create success if we still haven't gotten it. So again, starting in that good athletic stance with speed and that small wedge, we let that speed build up. And this time we'll make much smaller turns with just a really quick push, push, push. It's almost like a jab. And this time it's just push on one toe, right toe, left toe, right toe, left toe, right toe, left toe. And we'll often get success here if we haven't been able to get it. Usually if we're still having problems at this point, it's really because we haven't caught something and they've lost their athletic stance and are leaning back somehow, or they're just going too slow. Sometimes they just have too large of a wedge. Two other options, though, if we want to try them and we think we've got everything else set up, they can just start in a wedge and do a little stem, which is just pushing out the heel of one ski and then stepping on it. Or if they start in their wedge and they're moving down the hill, if they push their left little toe down to go left, and then try pushing down on their right little toe to go right. For some people, that will work. Our key here is to try to get them in a good stance and finding a way to make the skis turn. once we have them at a point where they're able to find a good stance and come down the hill making some turns, what we'll want to do is, after linking the turns, whether they're pointing feet or pushing on toes, whatever they're doing, whatever combinations, we want to try to have them work on turning the skis far enough so that they can come to a stop rather than making a wedge at the bottom. What that looks like with our students, real students who are fairly new to skiing, here they are, if they're in their good athletic stance and they have some speed going with a small wedge, oftentimes they'll start to almost go parallel with us very early in the first couple of runs, and that's because we've set them up with focusing on that athletic position and really having the speed in that small wedge. And if they're pointing the toes or pushing from toe to toe, they will start to get very good at starting to link up their turns and sometime going parallel right from the very first couple of runs. Let's just take a look at another realistic image of a student here who is in a pretty good position, narrow wedge with speed, got a fairly athletic stance, and for the most part we can see that there were already a few instances here where the skis were starting to come parallel very early on just their first couple of runs here. Here we can see things go parallel. And again, they are doing some banking and rotating, and everything is not perfect, but if we set them up with the prerequisites, their ability to focus in on turning and getting better and better as we coach them, remind them about their athletic stance, it just keeps getting better. So hopefully that's what our image is of. If we take the students too high, they'll oftentimes, we'll have to use a traverse with them to keep them into a good position. They'll oftentimes look like this, like they're standing back on their heels. They may come back even farther and bend down so it looks almost like they're sitting on a chair, or they may at the waist end up leaning back at the waist and look like this. So if our students are out of position, it may be because we've gone too high with them, or maybe we've never really corrected their position very well, and now we've taken them higher and it's just gotten worse. But if we have to use a traverse, it's usually an indication that we have a problem with their stance and that their turning skills are not real good, and so we'll probably be best if we try to get down to somewhere where the terrain is not as challenging for them. The traverse is really the defensive alternative to having a good athletic stance with the ability to turn our feet minimally and feel comfortable sliding down the hill and feeling like we can control our speed by just turning as much as we need to turn. The other thing that happens with the traverse is that we'll notice that people will start to turn their shoulders and lean inside the turn if they're starting off in a traverse and trying to do the top part of the turn first, because their momentum's going across the hill and then they have to try to get those skis to start moving downhill, and a lot of times they'll do that by rotating their shoulders and leaning into the turn. We can really see strong rotation in many cases where they just start right off turning the shoulders and the hips, and then they'll start leaning inside the turn as they're going through the turn. So again, we'd rather see those images like we just saw of new skiers heading down the hill in a good stance and starting to get a feel for turning their skis rather than being out of position and rotating and banking. So let's try to use that as a goal and an image for our first lesson. We're trying to teach downhill skiing, minimal turning so they're comfortable with the momentum and the flow down the hill rather than skiing across the hill in traverses and trying to make turns. When we're going to wrap up our lesson, it's very important we review what we did. We give them a plan of where to ski, because oftentimes they'll take off with a parent or a friend, they'll go too high, then they'll start leaning back, and everything will start to get very hard for them to ski once they lose their good skiing position. So we'll tell them gradually go up to the next lift tower, work your way up there, try to be able to make 10 turns down, and then you'll slowly start working your way to the next turn. So they'll do whatever they want to do, but at least you've given them the plan for success, and especially the parents if they're right there. If it's a kid, make sure they know how to take their skis off if they fall and can't get up, how to make sure the skis are across the hill. If you haven't talked about resetting the heels, if the toe releases, oftentimes they won't know how to do that. Let them know where the restroom cafeteria is at in a private lesson, and always end the lesson telling them to make sure that they can ski in control so they can stop our turn, so they're not just racing up the hill and going fast, but they've got to realize that it's their responsibility not to run into anybody. If it's a private lesson, you can invite them back if you're at Pine Knob, and you can schedule the lesson right away on your phone with them. So let's make sure that we set them up for a nice successful stance and some good skiing skills downhill at the end of these first beginner lessons so that they're ready to start to become good solid skiers, and we can work at the intermediate and advanced levels.